Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week, in partnership with the International Herald Tribune, and Becca Mary is with us, Nathalie Noughared of Le Monde, Thierry Arnaud of BFM TV, and Gil Mihaly of Yediot Aharonot, daily newspaper in Israel. We were talking about Libya before the break. Here's how Senam on Twitter reacted to the news of Gaddafi's demise. He wrote, Mohamed Bouazizi of Sidi Bouzid, if you only knew what it all meant when you did what you did. Mohamed Bouazizi, of course, that street vendor who set himself alight to protest the fact that he was being shaken down by local authorities, and that's what, in effect, sparked the Arab Spring. Programming note on that issue, France 24 brings you full coverage of the first post-Arab Spring elections, Sunday from 8 p.m. Paris time. That's 7 p.m. if you're in Tunis. And France 24's Julien Pain and the France 24 Observers, our citizen journalist website, already setting up a shop. Julien, the power of the internet, social networking, catching everyone by surprise in Tunisia. And my question to you is, how do the young bloggers in Tunisia who beat Ben Ali's firewalls feel about their leaderless revolution, well, in effect, picking leaders?
Well, they had to adapt because obviously it's quite easy to film a protest in terms of, journalism. It's an easy thing to film just a protest or someone being beaten up. But now, that's the democracy is coming. They need to change. They need to learn how to to become a journalist in a way. And they're playing many functions, social networks and bloggers. And for example, they're trying to get people to vote because many people are afraid that not that many people will turn up to the polls. It's a big challenge. But they're also playing another interesting role, I think. They're playing the role of watchdogs. And I'll give you an example that happened today. There's, of course, an official watchdog which is called the EASY, but they can't see everything. So the internet users, they're denouncing the frauds online. And I have an example. People said that today they received text messages from the main Islamist party, which is called Ennahda. And they're saying that they never accepted to receive these calls and these text messages, that they never gave their phone number to Ennahda. So they say it's illegal what Ennahda is doing. And they're even publishing the photos of the text messages online, on social networks, on Facebook, on Twitter. And we here in Tunisia, in Tunis, we tried to verify that information. And it happened to be true. We got the information from someone inside the EC, and they confirmed that Ennahda broke the electoral rule, and maybe other parties did it. And I think that's a wonderful example of how efficient can be bloggers and social networks to denounce the frauds. So we'll see on Sunday what they're going to find out, but I can bet we'll get other stories of this kind.
All right, Julien Pain, thanks for that. And, of course, you can go to the France 24 Observer's website to follow as it unfolds. We'll be going back to you, of course, during our Sunday election returns coverage. Nathalie Noughared, this is a story that you've followed from the outset. How do you think Tunisians feel about Sunday?
Well, I think this is a historical date. Basically, it's the first free election in the Arab world. If you take aside the elections in the Palestinian territories, which I think are a specific story back in 2006. But so Tunisia has appeared as obviously the bulwark, the absolute, the eye-opening place in the Arab world back in December, from December to January. This was the place where everything started, and it seems logical that this is the place where the first elections should be held. And they seem to be prepared and to be, imminent in fairly good conditions with, fairly mature society, people who want this to work. You don't see really large cases of polarization and clashes. There was an incident about this TV station that broadcast the film Persepolis, but overall it's been a pretty neat exercise of, preparation of an electoral vote exercise. And the sense I pick up here and the way it's viewed from France is this is going to work, and it's important that we show support for it. There are radicals in Tunisia. But when you look at the reporting that's coming out about these radicals, this is a minority, and most people do want to see, yes, Islam and religious traditions play a role on the political scene, find their expression on a pluralistic, political scene, but not become any kind of repressive element on society. There are women in Tunisia who will be watching very closely and who will fight for their rights, and there is a tradition of secularism. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a very important event for the region, not just what happens in Tunisia itself, but the impact it will have in terms of symbol on Libya, which we talked about, and then there's a more complicated case coming up, which is Egypt, which is more complicated. Yeah.
All right, and don't forget to follow our coverage on Sunday here on France 24 from 8 p.m. Paris time. We'll give you election returns as they come in. We already know that this Sunday's EU summit won't hatch the bold reforms that Paris had earlier predicted. In fact, we got a little bit of a taste of the mood back on Wednesday when it wasn't just people chanting, "We want our money back," who spoiled the goodbye do for retiring President of the European Central Bank, Jean-Claude Trichet. There was even a late arrival, the French president, missing the birth of his own daughter to try and woo the German chancellor. Let me ask you, Thierry Arnaud, how did he do?
Well, apparently not very well. It's a point that one of his advisors was making earlier on today, that things were so serious that he decided on that very day that he would miss the birth of his daughter to precisely go to Frankfurt and try to work things out with Chancellor Merkel.
Why did Paris, at the beginning of the week, say, he told, I think it was to parliamentarians from his own party, we're very close to a deal. Why did he come out with this when the German chancellor so clearly said, we're not going to have a deal right now?
Because that's the way he operates. He said that a few days before on that Sunday when he went to Berlin and had this press conference with Chancellor Merkel. He came out, apparently we understand that she was not very keen on having a press conference. He was very keen on saying a few words, and he made very bold statements to the effect that, they agreed on everything, on what it took to be able to get Greece out of trouble, how much money it would take to bring this European fund to whatever it took to convince financial market. In other words, everything was settled. They would not be able to tell us all of the detail, but basically the deal was done. And see where we are today. I was talking to a member of the French government today who claims to be very familiar with the workings of the German-French cooperation. And he told me in perhaps 10, 20 years, he had never seen things that difficult between Paris and Berlin. It is as bad as it gets today.
And of course, the fact that one of the credit rating agencies earlier in the week said it's got France on credit watch didn't help things, did it, Anne Bangemann?
No, it puts a lot of pressure on France to try to craft a solution that's not going to destroy the credit rating. France, the finance minister said we will do whatever it takes to avoid a downgrade. That's not easy when you're going into negotiations over the size of this bailout fund, when you're trying to talk about bank recapitalization, which, let's face it, is really the thing that the French are the most concerned about, having to spend tons and tons of public money to recapitalize the banks. That is one of the big sticking points. On the subject of why does Sarkozy stand up and say we've got a deal, to be perfectly fair, Angela Merkel said the same thing this morning. She stood up in Parliament in Berlin and said, listen, there's no rift. We agree on everything. What she meant was they agree in principle that there needs to be an enhanced bailout fund, that banks need to be recapitalized, and that something must be done about Greece. So you can parse the public statements, and markets are certainly doing that. I think what you've seen this week in what Sarkozy and Merkel have done is, and also in what Barroso did, by standing up and talking about how by lowering expectations that the devil will be in the details, it will take a long time to implement whatever is decided this weekend. This is when it was still a weekend summit that was going to decide everything. What you're seeing now is a really probably long overdue game of managing expectations of the markets, of acknowledging that the market is a player and a very important player in this drama, and that with the decision makers can't do what they've done in the past, which is simply to hope that on Sunday night in Brussels at 11:30, when they announce we have something of an agreement, that financial markets will be delighted and not tank the next day. We've seen too many times that they do.
Natalie, we keep being told that the crisis, or the latest part of the crisis, is going to concentrate the minds. And what have we seen? For instance, we see the Occupy Wall Street movements growing. We've seen lots of violence in the streets of Athens this week. We hear all of the about the rift between Paris and Berlin over the issue, over who will pay for the rescue. And yet, the way Anne is describing it, we're just going to sort of muddle along again. At what point do we really get to say this is the crucial EU summit?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to pretend I'm a specialist in the Eurozone crisis issue, but it's striking to me that I remember back in July there had been this first deal, and then everything was sort of put on hold or sleepy for weeks. And so yet again, we're facing this crucial deadline, which was initially Sunday and now is being pushed back to Wednesday. It seems to me the whole issue is about economic governance within the Eurozone, and at some point, that issue is going to have to be treated. And I hear some, officials in Paris, maybe they're into wishful thinking. I don't know. They're saying, you know what, people aren't paying enough attention to the positive element in all of this, which is that we are, within the Eurozone, the 7 countries of the Eurozone will have to build up some kind of new governance, and we will intensify our, relations and our cooperation. And so out of this disaster, which is not the word they're using, but is going to come something positive. We're still waiting for it, actually.
All right, positive spin running a bit dry. Here's how Anne Baghamery's newspaper presented, by the way, the arrival of that baby, Julia Sarkozy, and Patrick Chapat's cartoon on the opinions page. Sarkozy phoning home and saying, "Oh well, I'm done saving the euro. I'll go get some diapers." So again, it gets back to the point about crisis management. While we're on the subject of babies, there was what we call competing narratives in the news world. The week began with the naming of the main opposition candidate for next May's French presidential election, the socialists toasting the success of the country's first open primaries. A former party chair, François Hollande, a moderate, would beat conservative incumbent Sarkozy by 60% to 40% if the second round were held today. That according to one of the latest tracking polls. One that shows, here's the first round, the top 3 in the first round. That makes Hollande a 10-point favorite, according to this, if the election were held tomorrow. But then, on Wednesday, it was, of course, Sarkozy's turn to smile, the birth of his daughter, the first baby born to a sitting French president. The president, by the way, playing it very understated, first not speaking at all to the journalists, then not even revealing his daughter's name. You might even say, mum's the word.
The joy is all the greater because it's a private joy. And so I will only say this, they're both doing fine.
Gil Mihaly, what do you think of the president's strategy not to communicate on this?
He's trying to do the exact opposite of what he did 5 years ago, which is exactly the same thing that François Hollande is trying to do. So we have 2 candidates who are competing on who will be the exact opposite of Nicolas Sarkozy, model 2007.
Explain what you mean.
I mean, at the time he was out there communicating about almost everything. He had a very ambitious cultural, even anthropological project to change the way that French people feel about money, about ostentation, about consumption. He thought that because many people buy Gala magazine and watch American soap opera, that they will accept the way that Americans live the money. And he was wrong.
And the private lines.
He was wrong. The French attitude to politics is completely different from
Completely
anything
different.
we know.
And it's not just, by the way, the politicians. The story not even making the front page of some of the French papers on Thursday. From the outset, in fact, the reporting's been far more extensive in the tabloid press across the channel. This was the story in the Daily Mail on Thursday. And Thierry, it was something to behold in the France 24 newsroom because on the English language side, we were up for covering this story a lot more, how this will weigh on the election. And the French are sort of shying off the story.
Well, he is communicating about the baby. Don't be misled here. It's just being much more subtle about it. She's obviously showing, her shapely body when she goes to the G7 summit in Deauville, which is the official announcement as it is. They're not putting out a statement. They're just showing her doing this, basically. And there have been photographs in magazines. There have been a few interviews, one of them last night on television, in which she spoke about her pregnancy. So it's not like they're not saying anything about it. I think that you're absolutely right. They're just learning from previous mistakes, trying not to do them again, but still trying to play this story to their advantage.
And Nathalie Nogueret, what effect will baby Sarko have on his re-election chances?
Well, I mean, who knows? It reminds me of, you remember little Leo on 10 Downing Street and Tony Blair presenting little Leo to, obviously they're going to use this child in the campaign, but obviously it's more subtle, as you say, than initial PR campaigns.
A final word on this from Anne Bagamarie?
I don't think it's going to have any effect on whether he gets reelected. I think, like any political tool, it's a double-edged sword. And there are those who will say, isn't this great? He's just like everybody else. He's not a president bling bling. He's a new dad. And so I feel as though I can vote for him and he should lead my country. And they're also going to say, well, he's probably got better things to do now than lead the country. Why doesn't he go home with his kid and just let the rest of us get on with it?
He's trying to show that he's, in office, being presidential, that he has this experience of, for 5 years in office. And this is why he's building up the whole Eurozone crisis and the role he wants to play in it. He wants to show that he is convinced that the election campaign in 2012 will be run on the theme of who can best protect the French people from the crisis. And he believes playing on that chord, he has a chance.
And he's already used the baby in that narrative by saying, I thought it was so important to go to Frankfurt and talk to my counterpart in Germany that I am going to miss the birth of my child.
There you go. Anne Bagamarie, I want to thank you. I want to thank Thierry Arnaud, Nathalie Nogueret, and Gil Mihaly. And thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.